Hello, welcome to Hudson Way's Theme Thursday. Each week, we dive into a topic related to the power of bilingual education and talk about what makes our community so special. Today, I'm joined by Liz Willaum, the founder of Dual Education Resources, and we're going to talk about why immersion. So, Liz, can you define for us what is immersion?
Immersion is a methodology and a program model that um, children who have a first language, let's say English, for instance, will be immersed, and that's where the immersion name comes from. They are immersed in a second or third or fourth language. Usually it's the second language. And that second language can be any language of your choice. In Hudson Ways, in Hudson Way, they teach Chinese, Mandarin, and they teach Spanish uh, as the second language. But it's not the learning of the language, it's the learning of your content areas, your subject matter, such as literacy, such as math, such as science, such as social studies, in two languages simultaneously. That is what immersion is.
And, I should have introduced your background. You have been, Liz, a teacher early on in New York in the bilingual landscape. You've been a instructional coach, you've been a principal, superintendent, and now the founder of Dual Education Resource, where you go to a lot of charter schools and private schools. What has kept you in this field for the past 50 years?
It's true that I've worn many hats in this field of education. My first encounter with immersion was in a developmental bilingual program in the 1970s. I'm now dating myself, which I don't. But the reality is, I fell in love then. I fell in love with the fact that children in immersion not only have the opportunity to learn in a second language because they're learning the second language as they're learning content and academic subject matter, but they are also becoming smarter. And that's where my passion comes from. The fact that children become smarter, divergent thinkers, their brain becomes much more efficient. I saw that with my own eyes as a teacher. That alone gave me, put that fire into me that all children should be able to have that opportunity.
So, last weekend I read there's article in the New York Times about the fact that you can wear these new iPod, the iPhone AirPods
Yes,
that will do simultaneous translation.
that's wonderful.
So, is there still a reason to be in an immersion program to learn language if you can have technology that will translate for you?
Well, if that's what you're looking for, that's wonderful. I would use that for business. Or if I'm going to a school where they're all Russian speakers, I'm not a Russian speaker. That I Airbud with the iPhone, and I'm not advertising for them because I haven't tried it yet. But the reality is, that's more business, I guess. We're speaking to, and if we were just looking for the bilingualism or the biliteracy, but we're not. In immersion, the goal is bilingualism. Children should be able to listen, speak, biliteracy, read and write, think, feel in the first and second language with proficiency. It also has to do with a lot more than just that. And as I stated before, it's what it is doing to the brain, especially if you start it early.
That leads me to asking, you know, what age should you start and what are the benefits of starting young?
One of the critiques that I've always had about public schools is that they start second language learning, real second language learning, not, on a computer, some technology program, real, with a human being teaching you that you hope is a native speaker. But they started at the age of 12, 13, 14. The brain is predisposed to languages. Research shows that if you start early, a child by the time that they're 10, 11, 12 could have learned, if they're exposed to at least 9 languages. And we're only asking in an immersion program for 2. So this is easy. Reality. This is a reality. This is research. So yeah, I find that it's the best time to start is as early as possible. And the children should be exposed to a lot of the second language, which means that the more exposure, especially if they don't have families that speak it, that can help at home, they should be exposed 90 to 100% of their academic day in the second language. 2 is a good time to start, 2 or 3 years of age. The brain can develop the proficiency in both languages in academic content between birth and about 12 or 13. That's when that part of the brain starts closing that window of opportunity, because windows of opportunity is when we learn certain things with ease, when the brain is demanding that learning. The brain is demanding language because that's what humans, when the research is done, that's how humans learn. It's really demanding that language between birth and about 12 or 13. It's not that you can't learn languages after, because many adults learn languages, but you will never, ever, ever learn it at the level of a native speaker.
Right, that's that critical language learning window that we've all heard a lot about.
Absolutely.
And there's that research that says that as young as 6 months,
Yeah, absolutely.
children start to lose the ability to hear sounds that are not in their native language.
Right.
So we hear a lot that our students speak like a native because
Absolutely.
they've been in our preschool since the age of 2. And that's why we start them, because they can become independent and connect with their teachers at that age.
In my experience in Hudson Way, what was amazing to me was the fact that I could turn my back to a child and the child would speak to me. I would ask them a question, they would speak to me, and I was in awe of the fact that this sounded like a native speaker. A child that had no Latino background was speaking to me like a child that had been born in Colombia or Chile or España, and you would think that that child was a Latina.
And that happened in preschool because of the model that we chose that has more time in the target language. Can you talk about the different models that you've worked with, and how does that impact the cognitive development of that child?
Hudson Way's model has been, it's a model that has existed in North America for many, many years. It's the Genesee model that comes out of Canada. It comes out of Quebec and Montreal. And that model has produced children that outperform in 67 countries. They outperform 67 countries when you disaggregate the data on a test that is given to 14 and 16-year-olds called the PISA. This is the model that Hudson Way uses. It is a model in which children are immersed in their second language 90 to 100% of the time for the first 1 or 2 years. Then in gradual increments, you increase the first language, which is English for the most part. Um, so you have a 90-10, let's say, for a 2 or 3 year old, or 100% at the 2 or 3 year old. Then when you're a 4 year old, you have a 90-10. Then you increase it gradually. By the time they're in third, fourth, fifth grade, they're at a 50-50. So 50% of their instruction, remember, we're not speaking about learning the language. We're speaking about learning content matter, subject matter, complex subject matter at the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade in 2 languages at a 50-50. The model has been proven across the nation. And a lot of there's been studies, especially the Collier and Thomas study, which encompassed not a small sampling. We're speaking of 40,000 children, 46,000 children across the United States. That immersion program demonstrated that the 90-10 model, those children outperform all Gen Ed population. Gen Ed means general education, average monolingual students. They outperform them at a very, very high level, more than 20 to 30%. Then the other model, which is the 50-50, also outperforms the general population, the average English speaking population, but not as high as the 90-10. So we have to look at these models, and Hudson Way chose the best for its student population. It chose a population that is English speaking for the most part, because that's what comes to them, that's what they enroll. Many families choose for their children, select that their children be given this opportunity because of the long-term effects and the benefits that come with this bilingual, biliteracy kind of simultaneous learning.
So some of our families that come, because of this model, are seeing that their children are learning language so well. And they may think, our child's gotten far enough, is speaking. I'm not sure if we need to continue. Maybe we need to, so competitive, get into the prestigious ongoing schools. What do you say to a parent in terms of what the value and the benefits that a child gets aside from the language?
It's for we who are bilingual, we use a term. If you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't use the language, if you're not constantly developing, the language gets lost. And all of us who are second, third generation understand that about languages. So it's not a question of, let me give my child the exposure for 2 or 3 years and then let me send my child to another school where they're not going to continue. There are long-term effects. The long-term effects are very clear. Your child's brain needs 4 to 7 years to become proficient in the language, but it needs 5 to 8 years to really impact on that neurodivergent thinker that you want. They think more critically, they problem solve more readily and with more facility. They can negotiate in terms of negotiating through cultural, racial, diversity in and of itself. They have a facility which is amazing to me. These are not things that I learned out of a book. This is not theory. This is practicum. Hudson Way has been in practicum and has produced this product, this child that can think divergently, problem solve, a higher order, is much smarter. But You have to give Hudson Way the time to do that.
So sometimes, we get questions around the smaller amount of English time relative to other schools. Is there an impact on the ability of that child to develop in their English language arts ability?
The more you learn a second language, the more you understand your first language. If your first language is English, the more you learn Mandarin or the more you learn Spanish, the more understanding you have because there is something called metalinguistics. You think about the languages. You think and you speak about the languages. That is part of the instructional day in Hudson Way. Uh, no, you don't lose any English. The world outside of Hudson Way is an English world. They also, if they're given the time in Hudson Way, will get, by the time they're in third grade, fourth grade, to a 50-50 model where they're learning English, uh, reading and writing at a deeper level because their brain has become dense anyway. So they think on a deeper level. Teachers have to, and it's a rigorous program. It's a consistently rigorous program. And rigor is what makes Hudson Way different from other places, even other immersion programs. If you compare Hudson Way with other immersion programs, I can't compare it to other private schools because other private schools are not doing what Hudson Way is doing. They're not immersing the children and having them learn the languages in content, in academic content simultaneously. So they will not get the same product. I compare Hudson Way to other immersion programs that have not chosen the right model because there are models that work well, and then there are models that work superbly as Hudson Ways does. You just have to give it the props that it needs to have.
Rigor is a really important word. I'm so glad you brought that up because that is something that I know parents look for in why they choose the competitive schools. How would a parent understand what is behind and know that there is rigor in an immersion program like Hudson Ways?
Parents that first they have to trust. They have to trust and become familiar with what it is that they're putting their children into, especially parents who are not from a bilingual background. If you're a monolingual, you may have chosen an immersion program such as Hudson Way so that your child can maybe learn a little bit of something in another language for, I don't know, enriching reasons. But the reality is the rigor comes from the manner in which uh, Hudson Way has developed its academic material. It uses units of study that are interdisciplinary, so they're working in all the disciplines, and they are asking questions because rigor is about asking questions, critical thinking questions in which children are not simply answering a yes or no question or looking back into a reading and finding the answers in the reading. No, they have to become thoughtful. And since their brain has become much more developed, because of the exposure to the immersion model, they can answer questions with much more critical thought. They evaluate. They evaluate situations and problems that have to do with building blocks at the age of 4. They're having those conversations in their minds, and the teachers are um, actually asking them to speak to what is going on in their brain. That is metacognition. The children are asked to think critically and then to speak about their thinking critically. Words like evaluate, what would predict the end, another end to this story. That can happen when you're 3 years old after you've been in a read aloud, in an interactive read aloud. So the methodology that is used within the classrooms of Hudson Way have been done intentionally and very thoughtfully.
What a great time for all the kids at this young age to be getting the synaptic connections
It's
that are
great.
really making them
Yeah.
smarter. You brought up that some families, may be monolingual, and does the parent need to speak another language for their child to get the benefit of becoming bilingual, biliterate?
No, no. It's nice to have parents that can support the language at home. But the only thing that you ask parents to do, and the only thing that they should be doing, is reading and having wonderful conversations, bonding with their child in their native tongue, whatever it should be. The work is done in the school, the work is done in the classroom by the teachers, and that's where it should be. Uh, Home is for whatever the practice is. If the teachers want them to take something home or read something at home or have the conversations at home, it's practice of what they've done during the day. It's the day is what's important.
And, over the many schools that you've worked with, I'm sure you've seen many graduates that have gone through immersion programs. Do you have, any typical profile of some of these students in terms of what they're able to do, opportunities that they have that you might be able to share?
I have often stated that an immersion program can change the trajectory of a child's path in life. Uh, to be able to speak, read, and culturally have a different or diverse thinking and negotiating in so many different cultures and races and creeds, these children rise to that occasion. They also have a level of empathy and compassion because they know now what it is. Yes, I find that children who have gone through immersion programs and have stayed in at least 7 to 8 years. I'd like it to be a pre-K through 12. That's my dream. I've always had that dream. But if they have it 7 to 8 years, which is what linguists say it takes to really become totally proficient, and to understand the pluralism as it relates to the cultural piece, these children change the world. They think differently. Um, I've seen children and I've seen children who have come out of very poor, very, very difficult, challenging situations, trauma. So children who have been traumatized go through this. I've also seen children who come from very affluent backgrounds. They all end up in the same place. These children are incredibly empathic, and they usually dedicate themselves to entrepreneurship or professions where they are truly global in their mindset. I've seen children who, again, come from very difficult backgrounds become doctors, lawyers, engineers. One is that I know is working in Hong Kong. He's a trilingual African American child. I've seen children who come from affluency who have come to Hudson Way and in the fourth or fifth grade have had discussions regarding I want to be a doctor of all borders so that I can help other people. And when I see him again in college, he's actually working in a robotics program with a dentist, really looking for ways of enriching that realm. So he took his engineering that we saw then.
Yes, I know exactly who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
we
And
used to
and
see,
we see, and we see that because
Yeah.
these students, and I hear from
it's scary.
parents
It's scary.
in terms of the confidence. You talked about entrepreneurship and risk taking.
Yes.
How these students have that confidence and can play both cultures.
They have
talking
to start risking when they're 2 and 3 years old.
That's true.
They have to start looking around and taking in all the cues and clues as the teacher is speaking and making a second language comprehensible to them as it relates to whatever academic subject they're being exposed to, math, science, social studies. It's an incredible thing to watch. So they have learned to start taking risks at that age. That risk is, I am going to try to verbalize so that I can make this woman or man understand what it is that I'm trying to say so that I can respond, because children want to respond and please their teachers. That's and to please their peers in a second or third language. So this is that risk taking starts there.
And I've heard you talk about the magic of immersion, and that's exactly what I think maybe some parents, when you're looking at it from the outside, don't necessarily appreciate that what is going on in that child's brain is magical.
It's magic. It's magic. I've always said it is magic. I saw a child, because we also have to understand when you're in an immersion program, the long-term benefit we know is that you get smarter. Your brain becomes more efficient. The synaptic connections are incredibly more plentiful than in a monolingual brain. Not that we're putting down monolingual. The reality is these children think differently. They're smarter. They're more efficient. I saw that. I saw a child come in, and it can move the cognitive. It can move. It can. It can move cognition to a higher level. There are a few things that change IQ. Very few, because usually IQ is when you're born. It's innate. What you got is what you're gonna get. Simple. There are a few things that change IQ, as the research says. The exposure to a second language, learning languages simultaneously for prolonged periods of time, not for 2 or 3 years, 7, 8 years, learning deeply and falling in love with an instrument, like the violin, like the piano, it will move that IQ. It will move that cognition to make it gifted, a gifted brain. This is the reality. So that's where the magic comes in. I saw children that came in very average, sometimes below average. And 7 years later, 6 years later, I would sit down with the teachers as we're evaluating the child's academic prowess, and we are taken aback by, wow, this is like magic. And that magic is what provokes my passion to continue propagating this immersion as the solution to so many of our problems in the United States.
Yeah, and speaking of problems, I mean, in terms of, you can see the research around how children's reading and their knowledge of math have declined
Absolutely.
over the years.
Absolutely.
And with, social media and technology going the other way of pulling people away from books and things, this is one answer possibly to that. And with AI coming and taking jobs, I mean, you want children who can think for
Who
themselves.
who can think, because that's one of the problems in the US of A. Schools have not been teaching children to think. Margaret Mead said it. You must teach children to think. Hudson Way, naturally, it's a natural evolution of the program. Children must think, and they're thinking in 2 languages.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end our podcast on that thought of, things happening and our children at Hudson Way being able to think critically and think into languages, given our
Think,
global
feel,
world that's
dream.
getting
This is what we-
smaller, right?
Absolutely.
So I'd like to thank you, Liz, for coming back and having this conversation at such an opportune time.
It's
in
an
this
honor. I keep
crazy
telling you,
world.
it is always an honor to come back. Just to walk the hallowed halls of Hudson Way is an honor. I wish there were 1,000 Hudson Ways across this land of ours that we call the United States. I cannot imagine the magic that we could contribute to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you'd like to learn more about Hudson Way's unique immersion model, visit our website, www.hwis.org, or connect with one of us on social media. We'd love to meet you.